Octopath Traveler definitely had my interest when Square Enix announced it, mostly just because of how it looked like. There was that, and the fact that there was going to be 8 different stories with 8 different protagonists, and that had me hooked just because I really want to see how all of them played out. But I actually didn't play the game at launch because I didn't have a Switch at the time. But even then, when I did get the console, I didn't play the game there because I eventually had received it on Steam. But I don't really think that really would have changed my thoughts on the game, considering that it's not really much difference between the ports, it's mostly just technical stuff. But I think it's a good time now to get into the topic of the video, and one of my first likes has to be the graphics. I really do love sprite work, and honestly the ones here are just amazing. This is with every aspect, that being the characters, monsters, and especially the bosses, because they are pretty massive, and frankly I just love their style because they do look kind of different from the normal sprites, but not too different, and the style they gave off is amazing. And even with the normal monsters and the normal characters, I think they look pretty detailed. And honestly, I would definitely recommend playing this game on PC because you can max out the graphics if you have the specs for it, and frankly it just looks far better on there. Then we also have the gameplay, and frankly I find it to be pretty fun. Each fighter is on a line on when they can act, similar to stuff like Final Fantasy X and Digimon Cyber Sleuth. But there's two key differences where the enemy has a guard number, and you actually have to hit their weaknesses enough time to just break the weaknesses and make sure they go as less as possible. And you break their weaknesses by either using a melee weapon, it depends on the enemy, along with different elemental attacks. And the second thing is that this game has a boost system where it can increase your normal attacks or just increase whatever effect of spell you're using. So if you boost it up by 3, the effect of whatever spell you're using increases by that, or you could just do 3 normal attacks. This I like because it adds some depth on what you want to do with each turn. So maybe you can wait for another boost, or just in hope actually break their guard and hope you have enough by then. There are also items that help you raise your boost, so maybe you can help raise a different character's boost. Say if they're later on in the turn order, you could just do that too. There's a decent amount of depth here, and definitely is a system that I think is very fun to mess around with. The game also has a nice amount of customization you could do with your party members. Each character might have a set initial class, but the secondary class can be whatever you have unlocked. Along with that, you can give them any passive ability you learn from said classes, which is really nice. And each class does also give you stat buffs and different weapons that you could use, so making sure you get the most out of that character's initial class and whatever else, and just making sure you have all your bases covered is just really fun to me. I also think the game has a nice amount of customization you can do with your party members. Each character might have a set initial class, but the secondary one can be whatever you have unlocked. Along with that, you can select any passive ability you have already learned from leveling up the class, and I find that really nice just because you can mix and match them. Each class also does give stat buffs and different melee weapons, so making sure you have all your bases covered for weaknesses and making good use of the character's initial class can be really nice to me. I also think the game is pretty replayable, mostly where you start off in the game. Since there are 8 different protagonists, you can say start off with Cyrus and then go get Alfred right after. Or you could start with Primrose, go get Therian and whatever else, and the game's really open with that. And of course, you have to at least finish the chapter first to move on to the next one, but other than that, it's still pretty open. Maybe on a second playthrough, you can say get someone like Philia, maybe because you want a healer as soon as possible, so you don't have to go out of your way to get the healer class a little bit later on in the game. But having a healer class might be, good early on. I also like the stories in the game, even if some of them do kind of feel more slice of lifey. I say that because ones like Teresa's, Alfred's, and Ophelia's don't have the biggest stakes, but they're still pretty fun, and my favorites definitely have to be Therian's, Primrose's, Cyrus's, and Teresa. And for the most part, I think the OST is amazing, and they fit all the areas really well, and for the battle songs, they get me really hyped up. So my favorites definitely have to be the Dark Caverns theme, River of Life, and also the battle themes, to name a few. I also do like a lot of the songs because they reflect the area you're in and the culture and whatnot, and it really helps me get immersed in the world. And I honestly do love Octopath Traveler a lot. It's definitely a JRPG that I think it's really nice, and for a brand new IP from Square Enix, I think it's solid overall. But even then, there are some aspects of the game that I frankly think don't really hold up. And one of the things has to be how grindy the game is in both learning new skills and how you progress through the story. For the latter, you basically have to reach different level requirements to make sure you can actually deal decent damage to the boss. And what sucks is that the backup members can't gain EXP, so you're constantly going to have to swap out guys every single chapter. And another thing that sucks is that whoever you start the game with can't get swapped out until you finish their story, so that kind of limits you to just bringing 3 people. And it sucks even more because, you know, say whenever you do a different person's story, like for example, if you're doing Teresa's, you can't swap her out until you finish that chapter. So it's just like you bring 2 extra party members to grind up, and that kind of sucks. And then there's the skill EXP, and I feel this one moves at a slightly slower pace. So if you want to max out all the classes, you're going to have to spend a lot more time grinding. Another issue I think that makes the game a little bit tiring is just how repetitive the story chapters are. What I mean by this is that every new chapter, the character goes to a new town, something comes up relating to the goal in chapter 1, they walk around the town for a bit, gathering information, they find that information, they go to a dungeon, they fight a boss, and they get told to go to a different town and repeat. And while I don't think the story is all that bad, it's just the formula of how they're presented I think kind of sucks. I also found the navigation with the minimap and just the map design to be kind of confusing sometimes. First, with the minimap, it's basically like a little fog circle that has icons to show you where things kind of are, and I think that really is annoying because, you know, you might just kind of see an icon that's close to you, but you might be at that exact point. And not even the world map helps because it just shows you lines on where each path connects to, so you can't even use that to help you. And while I adore how the maps look, it can sometimes hide hidden paths, and it may not be obvious, you know, to know how to get there, and you might just have to walk around repeatedly just to maybe find it. I kind of hoped you at least have a better navigation tool, or at least maybe can slightly rotate the camera. And another aspect I kind of was annoyed at was the bosses. They more or less just act like normal enemies, but just have a few gimmicks. They can summon allies, they can buff them up, and they can just lock away their weaknesses. And again, they're not really much different from just normal enemies because they can do anything that you can do except for, of course, break your weakness like every other enemy. But I think it's kind of lackluster since you do have to fight a lot of bosses, considering the fact that there are 4 chapters and there are 8 characters, so you won't really be seeing a lot of unique stuff from the bosses. But honestly, I still do think that my first 2 dislikes are the worst aspects of Octopath Traveler. And I can see where Square was going with this game. It just kind of felt like it drags on for way too long sometimes, at least to me. And while I enjoyed my time with the game, it's definitely not perfect, but I would still recommend this only if you don't mind the repetition and a little bit of grinding. And even with the latter point, it does scale with whatever enemies are, like level wise, but again, there are still 8 members, and what I mentioned before, it can still get annoying. But regardless, I still really do love this game, even with all the faults. And I also want to hear your guys' likes and dislikes, so let me know in the comments below. And of course, I'll mention my likes and dislikes before the video ends. Likes: amazing sprites, really fun gameplay, nice party customization, good amount of replayability, pretty cool stories, and lively OST. Dislikes: game is a bit grindy, each chapter is repetitive, navigation is really annoying, and the bosses aren't really all that unique. Thank you all for watching, and see you guys later. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow my Twitter, which is in the description.